I talked about, which we need to clarify with the assessor and potentially Department of Revenue, of this pre-levy lid lift number that the assessor is tracking. So there, I don't want to presuppose what that conversation might bring to light, but $3.10 is the number.
It's all gone.
Yeah.
These are interesting times in terms of this declining assessed valuation environment, and it's posing some challenging questions around municipal financing that we're having to vet out at the state level, and just not things that have been on the table.
So a third, 33% reduction in the city's assessed value, base assessed value over the last 3 years. So it's just a...
So thank you, Paul, for that
Sorry.
clarification. The takeaway point there is whether we were not proposing it as part of this preliminary draft budget, and as Paul indicated, there wouldn't be an opportunity anyway if that's something the council had wanted to explore. So there's no new taxes with respect to the property tax, and no new utility taxes proposed in terms of taxes, but it does assume, and we'll look at that later, in the utility funds, there's some rates that are programmed out, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Our overall revenue on property taxes is reduced because of this declining assessed valuation and this rate cap, as we just described. We're taking a conservative approach around revenue estimates, a little bit less optimistic than we were in July when we last met. I think it's prudent to be conservative with revenue estimates in terms of planning your expenditures, as opposed to being overly optimistic with what your revenues will be and then find yourself falling short. And the goal of our approach is to have minimal to no use of cash reserves in terms of keeping the general street and fire fund operating budget balanced, if you would. This continues to be a moving target that we're working on. As the assessed value information is not finalized yet. We still have to find estimates in a number of different areas, and we're still looking at some different things. But our goal is be as prudent as we can on that point in the final preliminary budget that you'll see next month. On the expense side of the ledger, we have constrained our baseline expenses moving forward in 2011, even lower than what we looked at for 2010. So consummating those expense reductions of almost $1 million that have occurred already in the 2010 supplemental. The department has done a good job of continuing that exercise, and the budget continues that constraint approach. As you were made aware last week, there have already been a couple of additional reductions made. There were 2 vacant positions in our utility funds, and so we have 2 employees that are moving from general or street funded positions into these utility funded positions that were already appropriated. A key message there is that the movement of those positions into those vacancies is going to have a minimal impact on service levels in the inspection area. This reduction is a workload related reduction, kind of keying into some of the data that you saw about the reduced activity that we've experienced from previous years. And then on the street side, actually, the individual involved hasn't been working in that program for about a year. So as we speak, the level of service in that area is not changing, but we are going to have them over in the utility area. The other, which was also announced last week, is that the mayor is proposing, subject to your approval, a wage freeze for non-represented employees, so that's your department heads and middle managers. That would be no cost of living increase. If anyone was eligible for a step in 2011, that would not occur. And one minor note, if anyone was eligible to move along the lines from one category to the next in terms of longevity pay, that would freeze. Just essentially your salary at the end of this year is your salary for 2011 in this classification of employees. Continuing on in the expense discussion, as we've reported all along, our costs are going up faster than our revenues are, which is the crux of the problem. Our PERS contributions that have to be made by the employer into the state system increased double digits in terms of a percentage increase. The actuarial studies have moved that along. There were a period of years where those were reduced, and we saw employer and employee contributions going down with the robust investment climate. That's turned the corner and is moving in this direction. So double-digit increases in terms of the change, and also in our benefit costs, double-digit increases around particularly medical premiums. And then another one, kind of a detail that RJ will expand upon as appropriate here, but we are enjoying a one-time savings by deferring what has been an annual transfer to our unemployment reserve, because that unemployment reserve is adequately funded. And so this year, or next year, we don't need to make that annual transfer. I think that covers it.
Yeah, we're well over our statutory limits in our code. We have in the past charged 2.5% of gross pay for each employee. We're well funded that employee, so we can discontinue it, and then we'll monitor it and link it to a level where we need to look forward and forecast to bring it back in, and we'll bring that to the discussion table.
So I wouldn't count on this necessarily as an ongoing truncation in expenditure, but it's just a monitoring of that particular activity and enjoying the savings that we get from 2011. Also on the expense side, but really in terms of some key investments, moving forward in the community, as you know, there is a vacant police officer position that exists and is appropriated, and the 2011 budget continues to fund that. We would look to fill that position. And I'll say at the same time, our approach to the budget is that would be a revenue neutral or an expense neutral item, and that, as was mentioned in Sean's information last week, we're going to have a dedicated traffic officer position that's responsive to some of the current concerns that we've been hearing from the community around issues in the neighborhoods, speeding and other types of traffic issues. This will give us a better and heightened presence in that regard, so it's responsive to what the community's been presenting to us. And at the same time, then that brings in revenue just based upon the current types of fines that there are for traffic issues, and it's our sense that it will pay for that. So we're expending $1, but we expect to bring in $1. That's more than $1, but just to simplify that analysis. Another investment, which was the subject of your joint work session last week with the Camas Council and the Board of Camas Washougal Commissioners, is around this proposed joint endeavor for economic development in the East County. This provides a little bit more detail for you in terms of appropriation requests. It's $55,000 in terms of investment for our future, looking forward to have a more focused economic development presence. $5,000 of that $55,000 is targeted for the Columbia River Economic Development Council, which you know is our EDC in the state system, and they receive funds on behalf of the entire county. Washougal has not been a contributor to that organization.